welcome to another episode of
Just
a
a squirrel
looking for a nut, trying
to get out of
this
rut.
All right, baby. This is the first time Bodie and I have done that together. I think we did it all right.
85%. It was pretty good.
85%. Jessica, were you saying it to yourself while we were talking? I want you to start doing that too. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Just a Squirrel Looking for a Nut, trying to get out of this rut. Now, Oleg is too busy traveling around the world. Actually, he's not here because he's too busy. He wanted to be here, but he was having some internet issues at the hostel he is staying at, and so he wanted us to say hello to everyone. But fortunately, the third squirrel out of the four squirrels is here with us tonight, and he's ready to talk to us about kindness. Melody, it is good to see you too. And by the way, Melody, it was good talking to you in our clubhouse room earlier this week. Jessica, maybe we'll be lucky and get you and Trip and everybody else in clubhouse too. Even if you don't like it, maybe you'll like it if you're hanging out with your homeboy here. Tonight's topic is, why do you choose to be kind? Now, you know, I worked for someone once, and she was in a caring profession. I won't say what desperate and disadvantaged population we were working with, except to say that they were. And this person was responsible for setting policy around how certain governmental entities and other people dealt with this population of people that were in need. And one day we were sitting around an executive room, and we were discussing about whether we should open a new facility that would help these folks out. And this individual's question, said in the kindest, most tender way, was, how far away is this facility from public transportation? Because those in need tend to use public transportation more than, let's say, billionaires. And someone said, well, after you get off at the very end of the subway line, which is 2 transfer stations away from the intake center, then you get into a bus and you travel about 45 minutes, and then maybe it's a 10-minute walk from there. Okay. And she goes, well, that's okay. I'd hate to accuse us of putting a squeeze on the poor. Was she being cruel, or was she being kind? And what's the difference? Bodie, what reaction about kindness does that story trigger in you?
It's funny with that, because I kind of equate that. What is the Hamlet quote? You must be cruel to be kind.
Isn't there a new wave song, like something from the 80s?
Probably.
You're too young. So,
doesn't Elvis have a song, Don't Be Cruel? But
oh, I'm way too young to even know who Elvis is.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, it's one of those things to me to where it's like I think some people just naturally, I don't know if it's just personality types, but because I've been studying those a lot lately. I mean, I think I've even talked to you about it before, just personality assessments on people, like digging deeper just into just surface level. But with that scenario there, I pick up on a little bit of cruelty through that kindness. How did you perceive it when you heard that?
It really set into place thinking about the difference between niceness, sweetness, and being kind. Sort of like when people would interview or talk to dictators. Who were nice and they were affable and they were friendly and that people got along with them. They're like, I liked them. They don't seem like they're that bad of a person. Then you'd find out they had just executed 40,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
kindness, niceness, and civility are all to me slightly different things.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I think kindness is it's like quality of being friendly with someone, which I think to me is kind of, it's easily acceptable to be kind, but I don't think that that's necessarily not all the times really a character trait. I think anybody can be kind to someone, especially if it's something that you're wanting, if it's something you need, if it can benefit you. And I think there can be some cruelty behind it in a way. I know oftentimes too, I think it can get misconstrued. The military, for example, I've seen so many times where, I mean, even going through basic training, it can be perceived as somebody being cruel, but there's acts of there's that kindness behind it. Like you're trying to help them, you're trying to get them to where they need to be, but it's all about how it's perceived and the intentions behind it. I think the intentions is probably the biggest thing.
How do you, particularly as someone who is a professor in leadership and who has been studying personality types, learn to assess intentions behind people? Like when you talk to me, how do you know that my intentions aren't pure evil? Or let's talk about Melody. She comes in here all the time and she writes things down that seem nice and I've talked to her and she seems just unbelievably good. But what if Melody was secretly evil? I'm sorry, Melody, I'm just picking on you. I actually can't even say that with a straight face because your heart is so massive. And you are so genuinely wonderful. I can't even say seriously.
That's how I felt when you were describing that about you. I was like,
and by the way, Melody says that the two are different things and that you can say something nice with a mean intention. And boy, oh boy, is that true. In fact, she specifically agrees with you about intention. But talk to us a little bit more about how you figure out intention. Jessica, Melody, anyone else who is watching, I know that some other people are watching, I can tell from what I'm seeing. We'd love to hear you thoughts. Scott says I'm so sweet. What you want to know, Melody, is whether I am sweet in a sincere way or whether I'm sweet in a way that's pure evil.
I'm actually glad I get to answer this before you, because I know when you answer it, you're just going to blow my answer out the water. But for me, intentions can be a little scary because you don't know what someone's intentions are. It's not something you can necessarily see. Oftentimes we tend to assume we know what someone's intentions are. And more time, I'm horrible at my intention indicator. I will misjudge people all the time, and I'll say, no, they're kind, they're nice, and then I find out that they do have ulterior motives. So for me, intention, it's a really hard thing to figure out, and that's something that, I mean, it really gets me thinking, because I just taught a lesson the other day through Giant Worldwide, who sponsors the Shadows podcast. But I was doing one of the personality lessons through there, and come to think of it, like all this stuff is just going through my mind as you were talking. We really don't address anything about intentions, like how to read people's intentions and see where they're coming from. And, you know, oftentimes you can take someone at face value, and that can bite you if you aren't sure. That I had something, recently, even in my life with like friends and stuff, where I'm like, I would swear to it. I'd be like, this is a fantastic person. And someone would tell you something otherwise. They would, tell you, oh, their intentions are not good. You're like, okay, thank you. I think I can read them pretty well. And then you find out that they're right. And, that's a scary thing. But I'm curious about your take on it. How do you read people's intentions? Because you seem like you have a pretty good read of that.
I like to think I do, but I will answer that with some ambivalence. I'll be absolutely honest with you, for reasons that I will throw out there for your comment as well as the comments of people in the audience. I like to think that my emotional intelligence is pretty high and that I'm savvy enough to be able to observe nonverbal cues, dissonance between the voice, the words, and the body language, words and action, as well as just general thinking through why someone is saying something and whether it really is making sense or whether it's just blather. Because a lot of times those dissonances are what, to me, lead me to suspect the in true intentions. The other thing too is having been raised in an environment where not everyone in my familial and social circles operated with the best of intentions as their default. I will say that I, at least to my own, in terms of my own self view, I have antenna for a mismatch, I'm sorry, between intention and behavior.
Hmm.
And I am a New Yorker. And you can't live here very long and be completely gullible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say this. We can pick up on con men and women pretty quickly.
And I'm from the South. Everybody's sweet to me.
Right. Bless their hearts.
Yeah. Bless my heart.
Bless my heart. But be that as it may, part of why I answer that with some ambivalence is because I also believe in and find myself falling into what may or may not be a trap. And that is assessing people's intentions without any evidence to the contrary as similar to mine. I empathize, but empathize based on the best information that I have. And that's not always accurate. I will say, in the most humble way possible, that my intentions generally are for the best. I'm not out there looking to hurt people or get one over or act self-defensively unless it's me or someone I care about is being attacked. And so I assume that people are acting with at least mutual self-interest at heart, if not outright concern and love for others. But the problem with that is, and that's why it's sort of, I'm answering with ambivalence, that flies in the face of what I might be observing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a bias that can cause me to miss things. One person, by the way, who has always come to this show with good intent, and it brings me genuine joy to see him here because I respect the work that he does so much. Gabe Leal, thank you for saying hello and being here yet again. You, as you know, Gabe, you're a superstar in the LinkedIn Live world. And when we have someone like you in the house, it always makes us feel extra special.
Gave a good shout out to us today.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
I wasn't on LinkedIn today, but if that happened, then I feel like wow, amazing. Thank you, Gabe. So Melody says, don't let Brene Brown hear that. Bless your heart, LOL. And I assume you're talking about the danger of empathy, because there are some people that say there's such thing as too much empathy. But Bodhi, what about you?
I think that's something that I had a conversation about with someone the other day. You were talking about empathy. To me, I think people can mask their cruel intentions by using empathy, sympathy, remorse as an act of kindness and to benefit them, to help them. And the example that I heard the other day when I was talking to someone was a lot of people get in trouble. They are, whether it's a police officer, a teacher, some sort of authority figure, and they can use sympathy, empathy, trying to get someone to empathize with them, or remorse to get them off the hook. They can, oh, I'm so sorry, very, very, pull on someone's heartstrings. Mm-hmm. Their intentions aren't, and I wouldn't really say cruel, but I would say their intentions are to pull the wool over your eyes, to fool you. Mm-hmm. And they do it by playing, the kind card, the sympathetic, the apologetic, I'll never do this again, that sincerity. And I think people can weaponize that in a way if they're good at, and that's what the individual told me who was talking to me. They said, I learned how to make my bottom lip quiver. I learned how to get my eyes teary. Wow. Because it would get me out of trouble. And I think people use that to their advantage at times. Take someone's kindness as a weakness to get out of it by either trying to get them to sympathize or empathize, or, like I said, playing that remorse card with them.
Have you ever chosen to be cruel?
I think everybody has. I think it's one of those things. Hindsight, and like you said, emotional intelligence is huge. Mm-hmm. Self-awareness. I know early in my career, looking back, if someone rubbed me the wrong way, or someone was slowing me down, or it was just for whatever reason. Yeah, I can definitely look back at some circumstances I've had, and I'm like, man, I was so cruel at that point.
Yeah.
But I'll admit it. I'll admit I did. I'll admit I was not a. I think we can all, everybody listening to this can probably say at some point in time in their life, probably professionally too, because that's where you have the most at risk. But yeah, or with the relationships, and yeah, I do think I've been cruel to people. You know, cruelty and kindness, you know, sometimes you have to be cruel, I feel, to be kind. And I think that's brutal honesty.
Why do you believe in that brutal honesty is the right thing to do?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's the right thing to do. I know some people who just live by it. They are just all the time just brutally honest.
But do you think that that's kindness, or do you think that that's cruelty, or do you think it's something else? Like, what do you think is behind that?
That's interesting. I think there's good intentions to it. I think someone's intending to be kind to help them. And that's something that I really started to figure out probably the last year or two, because I've learned that when talking to people, there's two types. There's those who are just like completely work driven, and then there's who are completely like relationship, emotionally driven. And I've seen charts like task people orientation charts. I've seen stats that show that more people are, I believe it's 67% of people are emotionally driven versus the 33% that are task. And I think that those task driven people have a huge disconnect in a way in terms of emotions when talking to people. I see it in the military all the time, where you work for me and I say, Scott, come on, you got to do better than that. That's unacceptable. Now, to me, that was kind. We're in the military. That's just me telling you, you know, I'm trying to correct you. And that's a good deed on my part to do that. You take it completely different. You take it as cruel. I take it as kind. And if you were to bring it to my attention that I came off to you that way, I would be completely startled. And it's not a facade. It's legit. Like, that I came off cruel to you. Are you serious? No, I'm so sorry. I did not know that impacts you. And I'll probably walk away thinking, what is his he's so just weak-minded. Oh my gosh.
It goes as to an interesting conversation that I had earlier in the week. And that was, by the way, some of the differences between organizational cultures and how that can play when people are interfacing with each other. The particular example that came up, it was during an entirely different conversation other than this one, with someone who's a veteran, who's in the military, I think the Air Force, like you. And this person talked about how when they interacted in civilian audiences, a lot of the quirks and the subtleties about how they may engage in these interactions were very, very different. And I shared a story about many years ago, and this was a situation where I really do look back with some regret. There was a veteran that had applied for a job with an organization that I was working for. I was part of a team interview. I actually kind of liked him, but he had clearly been in the military up until the point of this interview, or very shortly there before, not only based on his resume, but based on a whole lot of both verbal and nonverbal factors that were very apparent during the interview. And our actions weren't cruel to him, but he didn't get the job. And the job was because we felt it really wouldn't be a good cultural fit. But the intentions behind the cultural fit ambivalence, to say the very least, that the individuals on the team overwhelmingly had was cruel, because they were the things about him that marked him as a member of the military. No one was explicitly discriminating against him, by the way, because of his veteran status. That really wasn't the issue. In fact, that was a lot of what got him the interview. But they were things that, it's looking back on it in hindsight, I suspect that those that objected to it, and again, I was actually not opposed to hiring this person, were things that, like, they felt that there was a rigidity to him, that there was, the way he spoke was very short and clipped. The way he came off was very, or the way, the manner that he had, right? Like he sat there in a way that was not relaxed, but that was very formal, with his shoulders, his suit and his shirts. They were so crisply ironed. They were so perfectly put together. His shoes were blindingly well shined. And those were things that people felt would not make him a good cultural fit in an environment that was a little bit less formal.
Yeah.
And again, part of what my feeling state about this was we're punishing him for being too professional. I mean,
yeah,
right. But that, be that as it may, it was also one of those things where you didn't get the job, you found out where, and this is also something I've come to believe is cruel. You didn't find out if you got the job because you just never got hired, rather than sending you, which happens a lot in corporate America. You know, nice. I think the nice thing is to reject the person, let them know they've been rejected, not just, well, never heard from us again after you spent the time to dress up and polish your shoes and iron your shirts and come in for an interview. In that case, the cruelty, there's not intentional cruelty. It's more like we're too busy or we don't care, which is a different sort of, it's almost like a passive sort of cruelty. I've said a lot. Talk.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious about, because I wonder what their intentions were. Like, I'm curious, the ones who were not on board, what it was. I don't know if it was like their intentions were to not necessarily come off cruel, but do you think it was some sort of threat that they felt? Or
I think that they felt he wouldn't fit into the culture of the environment, like that he would not socially gel. He might not have. He may not have cared.
Yeah.
I suspect he may not have socially gelled, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't have done a good job. This wasn't a job where you were supposed to be the most popular person in the room, right? It wasn't like a networking job or something like that. And not only that, but I've come to realize, as I've gotten more sophisticated and more thoughtful about, and looked at my own situations in life, by the way, where I've been hurt and not gotten opportunities. Sometimes cultural fit is cultural insularity. They're not exactly like us, and so we are not comfortable with it, and that affects people of color. That affects LGBTQ people. It may affect people from economically deprived backgrounds that are attempting to break into organizations that have been historically dominated by, say, Ivy League graduates, things like that. And in this case, again, it was not, I don't know that, I think that if he had been a little bit more relaxed or a little bit less stiff, I think that perhaps the job, or he'd been a little bit less clipped in the way he spoke, it would have been maybe something that would have made them more comfortable. But cruelty, the lesson from that, cruelty can be also not giving people a chance.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot. Especially when, I'll go back a couple of years ago in my career when we were trying to hire someone for one of our positions at the schoolhouse. And we would have a list of people there in front of us. And if we knew one of them, and I mean, you think about it, it's this person's career. I mean, it's they're like, they have family. This is a golden opportunity for them, especially in the military. And I remember sitting there listening to people who were looking at these people's names, and it was like, no, they're too weird. They're too, they're too socially awkward. They're too much of this. And people wouldn't get hired because of that, because of how people felt about that individual. Based off some sort of experience. And then have you ever had this where you're like, well, what is it about them? You don't like, I don't know. It's just something about them, just something about them. You can't pinpoint it. But to me, thinking about it, I think that's cruel. I mean, because you don't give that person a chance. You don't give them a shot. I knew we were going to be talking about this topic, and I was riding around with my daughter today. And I was actually asking her, I want to get like a 13-year-old's opinion on a lot of these
I
stuff.
bet they have a lot to say about it.
She's literally Kevin McAllister talking to the guy shoveling salt on she's got all this good insight. But I was talking to her about, people being cruel. And she's like, oftentimes I think it's some sort of trigger from something they've had happen in their past. She says, I think it's something that they've had either at a younger age or a past experience at work. But I think there's some sort of trigger there that causes it, because people don't want to be cruel. I think they want to be naturally kind. Mm-hmm. But something there happens with them, or it sparks something to where it brings out that cruel side of them. Mm-hmm. So what do you think it has anything to do with past experiences, past trauma?
Sometimes I think it can. I think sometimes people are damaged, and so they react defensively almost without the benefit of full self-awareness, or they are trapped into psychological disorders that limit their actions. I read an interesting definition of personality disorder once, and the definition was that those that have personality disorders have very, very limited ranges of emotional responses to stimuli that comes their way. So if, for instance, you're a narcissist, your emotional response is limited to a defensive reaction based on perceived threats to your ego stability. Or if you have borderline personality disorder, your reactions might be limited to response based on fear of abandonment. And in some of those cases, the discomfort that we feel with how people are presenting that may be indicative of dysfunctions that could be toxic in an organizational environment, or even deadly if you're in the wrong environment, like the military or in a survival situation. I actually think it's good for us to not necessarily be cruel, but to activate those and act. So you're not bringing the local psychopath into the CEO position in your company. But other times, particularly when you're talking about things like neurodiversity, then I think that it is a different story. Melody's point is a fair one, isn't it? Up to the interviewee to make them feel more comfortable. And Melody, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this, because part of what I wonder is, part of me feels that way. And I definitely have learned over time to attempt to be that way when I am in an interview situation or in any situation in which I'm asking for something. On the other hand, part of me thinks, well, but like, how can I know if I'm doing that? Right? Is that too high of a bar to possibly cross?
I think with the interviewee thing, I think, or the interviewer, I guess it would be. I'm all for making someone feel comfortable when they're in there talking to me. If it's some sort of interview, we've interviewed people recently, and because I think you get more of their real self if they're comfortable. I think if they're kind of, so you never know, that guy that you were talking to, he may have been the most fun person to hang out with. But he's in there for the interview and he's sitting at attention, got the perfect creases starched in his shirt. And, he's trying to play the role. I think oftentimes we try to play the role that we think they want us to be when we go in for interviews and stuff. And I think that, even, when we were interviewing some candidates for our school, for a new instructor in the past, we often will sit back and we'll say, this person, I just felt like I wasn't getting their full self. They felt like they were too, if you see them nervous, try to bring up how nervous you are. Yeah, I think that's awesome advice too. But you want to get that authentic self from them. You want to get their authenticity. You want to get just who they are day in and day out. And I think a lot of times when you do interviews, I think the interviewer does set the tone. Sometimes it's more of you get a positional power feel when you walk into an interview, and it feels like intimidating to be sitting in front of them. And you try to read them, try to fit into whatever job you're going into. You try to say all the right answers. But yeah, I think just being yourself, trying to get them to be themselves, be as authentic as possible.
This whole interview discussion is interesting, particularly when it comes to cruelty. When I was going out, when I was leaving law school, I did interviews for post-law school jobs. And I went to an interview with a district attorney's office.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a panel interview. And they asked me, I mean, it was rough. And every time I answered a question, they shot stuff back at me. And at one point, they asked me, I think, why I wanted to be a prosecutor, or if I would work for a defense company, or I'm sorry, if I would be a public defender or work on the other side. And I remember I gave an answer that explained the nature of the adversarial system and that I view both parts of the adversarial system, both the defense and the prosecution, as equally important, to the extent that everyone was about seeking justice.
Mm-hmm.
Then I actually could get behind working in either situation. And the people on the panel all went, "Ugh." And I said, hey, I laughed. I said, hey, that's the best answer I can give. And they told me, well, that's an answer. And I was like, I left and I was like, well, I didn't get that one. I not only was I sort of laughing and saying didn't get that job, but I felt utterly incompetent. Like I would have been the biggest flunky that Columbia Law School had ever had. And then I got moved on to the next level. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes also you don't know, right? By pleasing, I feel like the lesson from that for me was, yeah, just go in there and be authentic because you don't know. Maybe, obviously, the answer that I gave them to that question, which they seemed to not want to hear, wasn't a deal breaker. They wouldn't have moved me on. For all I know, they may have been testing me to see how I would respond to hostile judges or stressful people that I'd be working with or all these sorts of things. I don't know. It was cruelty, at least as experienced by me in the moment, although looking back on it, it probably was a little bit more of this tough love scenario that Melody and you have talked about.
I think so. I had a similar situation when I got hired as an instructor. I went in for an interview and they were stiff as could be doing the interview with me. And I remember I made a joke, got nothing from them. I remember I left there and I was like, wow, that could not have gone any worse. And I knew another guy who got interviewed for the same position and he told me his answers to some of the questions. And I was like, man, those were really, really good answers. Wow. You got the job. And they offered it to me. And I was very shocked. Wow. I was like, I'm sure they hated me. Yeah. I based off there, you were talking about nonverbals earlier. Their nonverbals, even if I said anything remotely funny, it was a
I wonder if inside they were like dying. And after you left, I wonder if they're like, oh my God, it was so hard to keep it together.
I was sweating. I was sweating through my shirt. It was the worst interview I ever gave, but it somehow worked out in my favor. But yeah, I think, do you think power, like positional power, plays a role in cruelty?
Great point. And Melody, by the way, I'm glad you would have been laughing with us. Be sure you share some stories with us sometime about times if you were interviewing where it didn't go quite well. Positional power. I love the fact that you use that word positional in front, because what you're talking about is not real power, except to a limited degree. It is right embedded in that is sort of the assumption that the person doesn't have genuine tacit authority, or at least
no personal
interdependency, power. Right? Yeah. They are just leveraging power based on title. One of the most abusive bosses I've ever had was, I suppose, a bit embarrassed by my abrupt resignation working from her that was not according to her plan or her convenience. And I was well liked by my staff and by my colleagues. And so a goodbye party was planned for me. And this boss of mine happened to be the head of this particular organization. And the person that was planning the party went to her and said, oh, this is when Scott's goodbye party is going to be. And, you know, we're asking for blah, blah amount of money. And she screamed, he's not having a goodbye party. He is not having a goodbye party. And this woman said, to her, I'm sure, eternal regret. But he was your deputy. We can't just not say goodbye to him. And she screamed, I am the head of this organization. You do what I say. That to me is an example of someone whose power was purely positional, because if it was anything other, if it was real personal power, A, she would have never said that. B, the person would have never talked back to her like that way either. She wouldn't have felt the need to assert her authority. And so I feel like that relates to your question, because positional power is highly tenuous, and those that hold power only by virtue of the position itself tend to be quite insecure. And insecurity, again, triggers ego threats. And people respond to ego threats, in my observation, in ways that are irrational or are designed to wipe out that threat, which is cruel, unless by rare occasion when they really are under threat and the threat needs to be just stopped. Yeah. But a lot of times they're perceiving things like the desire to have a goodbye party, for me in this case, as a threat. It was on some level a threat to her ego. It was enough of a threat to her authority that she felt the need to assert it in a way that was screaming and at the top of her lungs. So I would say yes. And it goes to me as to why, if you have power, it's best to make positional power. It's best to make sure that you're cultivating the non-positional pillars that are holding it up. Especially another situation that I can tell you about, and this person also was cruel. He only had positional power. He was a supervisor that worked in a unit adjacent to somewhere I worked, and his own supervisor figured out that he had screwed up something. And so this supervisor called in his staff people to talk to them about what exactly had happened. And he was on vacation when the screw up was discovered. And one by one, not only did the people that were called in go into the supervisor's office to trash him, but people were lining up to voluntarily rip him to shreds. And he was gone very shortly thereafterwards. Positional power, it is a bucket that can leak very easily.
Yeah, I have, I always heard, if you have to pull a job title,
yes,
you have to pull a rank, if you have to pull that card on anybody, you should be asking yourself, what did you do wrong?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Somewhere along the line. And then the other thing is, and I've always kind of lived by this, especially being in the military, but if you have enough personal power, positional power is not something you even need in your repertoire. They'll follow you just because of who you are.
Yeah.
And the military now is so much different than when I came in. When I first came in, positional power was running rampant in work centers. I mean, it was, you got to a certain rank, you were given the title of supervisor, and that head just got bigger, and you lived off that. And I remember my work center, my very first work center, I almost got out of the Air Force because of how cruel some people were. And I know someone probably listened to this like, military, you're mad because you joined the military and they were cruel. I mean, there's so many stories I had about my first work center, but their positional power was, it was, I saw someone, and I think Melody brought this up with that comment about, I had a coworker. Yeah, it was awesome. Then got promoted to manager, turned into a cruel boss. They demoted him and he was nice again. I saw someone who left on a Friday, same rank as myself and some of the coworkers. And they were like, all right, well, hey, I'll see y'all on Monday. And they were being promoted the following Monday. It was the first of the month. They come in Monday with a new rank. They were late. And when they walked in there and they immediately looked at all of us and they were like, what's going on, assholes? And we were like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Completely different demeanor about them based off that rank, completely different demeanor about them based off that position that they were now given. It was like a completely different person. And I mean, talk about cruel. They would have, for the people in higher up positions, we would have like morale pizza parties.
Mm-hmm.
You would have large pizzas over here from a really nice pizza establishment. And then for the newer individuals in the work center, we had bagel bites. And they were like, you don't deserve to get a slice of pizza. You don't deserve to get this. You haven't paid your dues. You haven't been in long enough.
Yeah.
So a total misuse of positional power,
Yeah.
which in return, you would hear the term all the time, like, I respect the title, but I don't respect the person.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest insults I think you can hurl at someone, is that I'm forced to respect you just simply because of your title, but not because of who you are as a person.
Yeah. It's like I'm forced to give you the externalities of respect. But don't think for one hot second I'm feeling it inside.
Yeah.
What do you think is the psychological dynamic, though, behind the story that Melody told? Because one of the things, first of all, I wonder if the person realized that they were now having to, I wonder if, like, inside they were like, okay, I've been demoted, I have to be nice again. Doggone it. Or if they were not realizing what happened. And then Melody, like, also, how did you view this person? Were you ever able to take their niceness seriously? That would have been a bit much for me to take. I've got to admit, I've never experienced that particular sort of bell curve of behavior.
I saw someone get demoted, but when they were in a position of authority, they really, really rubbed everybody the wrong way. And they got demoted. And when they got demoted, they tried to, go in with Melanie's scenario. They tried to be buddy with everybody, like nothing happened. It was like, well, hey guys, hey, I'm back. And nobody bought into it. They were taking that individual's kindness as some other intention behind it. They were cruel for a reason. And I think that kind of goes, poses a question too. Do you think people will use cruelty to their advantage if they're given the opportunity?
I'm sorry, you went out for just 1 second.
Do you think people will use cruelty to their, do you think they will resort to cruelty if given the opportunity?
Yeah. So if they are not of sufficient maturity, or if they are of low character,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And Richard, I do want to make sure that gets acknowledged. Richard Marks, it's good to see you here. You've been a long-time fan of the show, and it's always great to have you in the room. I will not deny, if responsibility for a company's profits falls on managers, and then the managers are choosing to be cruel, he's right. It becomes a threat to the ongoing viability of the organization. Even if the short-term profits are increased because people are acting out of fear or acting to avoid punishment or their boss's wrath, it's not sustainable. People burn out on that all the time. And that's a very dangerous position for any company to be in, even though the P&L sheets can temporarily hide it, or other performance metrics if it's an NGO or a government agency or something. Yes. Again, answering your question, the greatest temptation that comes with power is arbitrary cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, perhaps in many people, sometimes I think testosterone helps with this, by the way.
Yeah.
Helps make it worse, I should say. There is a joy or a rush that comes from assertion of dominance, particularly if it is a forceful assertion of dominance, if you very visibly and harshly throw someone down. And that's where I go to maturity and or low moral character. If you don't know better, and that's how you feel leaders behave, or people in power behave, maybe that's the only way that people in power have behaved in the environments that you had growing up, then it might be lack of maturity, or it might be lack of self-discipline around how to manage difficult situations or what leadership really means. Very early in my career, I don't know that I was intentionally cruel, but if I were frustrated with someone, if I said do A and they did X, Y, Z, rather than exploring it or attempting to motivate them to have a conversation with me, or to simply go back and say, do that again, and please do what I said, I would lose my temper, and I would be very, very harsh in the words that I use. And I'm really ashamed of that, looking back on it. And once someone even told me, Scott, that's not a very attractive look. And it certainly wasn't effective. It didn't build any loyalty, or didn't make me a better person. It certainly didn't improve their performance. They were demoralized.
Yeah.
So I think that though was, in my case, either frustration or a desire. Sometimes I felt, and have felt, and I'd be curious to know what you think about this, that with other men, there can occasionally be desires to test a supervisor, or test a male leader to see if they'll assert themselves, or see if they will really rise to the occasion of being the leader. And so sometimes my mentality was, I need to stomp them down before they stomp me down. And so I would be cruel because there was a need on my part to preserve my positional dominance. And I didn't have the wherewithal or the experience or emotional intelligence at that time to think through, okay, how are some more subtle and sustainable and effective ways that might be a little bit more work to achieve this particular outcome that I wanted. So that's a short answer. Now, I say in some cases. In other cases, I do think there are those that have all along a desire to be cruel. They may just be sadistic, or they may have some of these disorders that we talk about. And when they are in a position of power, they actively seek to do it because they're enjoying it. They get a kick out of they
thrive off of it.
Yeah. Power doesn't necessarily mean to that sort of person. It can mean being nice to someone, allowing those who are under your thumb to enjoy the benefit of your benevolence. But it can also mean more dramatically cruelty. Then there are also people who are strategically cruel. And that's a different story. I hope that this sort of thinking has become outmoded, but I will share it and give some, I don't know if I want to say endorsement as to its legitimacy, but some acknowledgement of the fact that it's been viewed for parts of human history as legitimate because of the length of time and some of the people that engaged with it. So Caesar Augustus in the Roman Empire was notorious for this. If they surrender to us right away, then we make them a province, we make the royalty, local governors, and we don't sack the city. We make sure that they're flooded with food and all the other benefits of being part of the Roman Empire. If they resist us, the leaders become slaves, we sack the city, and civilians are by and large destroyed, killed. And he said, you reward those that are going on the highway the way we want them to, lavishly, but you punish those who disobey ruthlessly and without mercy. And so that to me is strategic cruelty that he exercised with extreme effectiveness if your metric was the ability to expand the empire and hold on to territory.
It's a textbook example of cruelty. I mean, if you look up the definition of it, it's to willingly cause pain and suffering to others. I mean, I think that's prime example right there. I've seen people like that. You're with me without me. You're either with me or you're without me. This is the line in the sand. And I think another part of that too is perceived incompetence in others. I've seen that a lot, where if they perceive someone to be incompetent, they perceive someone to not be capable, not up to their standards.
Yeah.
I think you see cruelty kick in. And I've seen that so much with people, to where they'll write someone off. They'll listen, but not necessarily hear what somebody's got to say, because you've shown that you can't carry your weight around here, and they will be cruel to that individual for the rest of the time they work with them. But no, I think if you look throughout history, I think there's so many examples of what you just gave dating back to the Roman Empire. But yeah.
I will say again, learning from mistakes and being candid and authentic about errors and imperfections. There was a job that I started that I had been recommended to by someone that I worked with, and he knew me quite well. And his girlfriend worked there. And there was a whole group of attorneys that were given an assignment, and they were to report to me or give the assignment, at least pass it by me for my review. And he apparently told his girlfriend, who I later found out told everyone else in this group of attorneys as a warning. They said, he said, Scott Mason will expect the written work that you give him to be awesome. Those sentences better look good. It better have been proofread. It better make sense. It better be of super high quality. If it's not, he'll think you're an idiot and he'll write you off forever. And you'll never be able to convince him that you have a brain. And he said, especially things like make sure that there are complete sentences, don't have sentence fragments or use subjects and verbs and all. He was like, really watch out for this. And of course, she felt the need to tell all of her colleagues. And then eventually it got back to me. Oh yeah, we heard. I was like blown away by how good everything was that I saw. And then I heard later, oh yeah, it's because so-and-so went and told all of us, make a mistake on this writing at your eternal expense. He'll think you're a moron for the rest of your life, and it'll affect your career. And that was a real wake-up call for me. I was being perceived, and presumably I had behaved in a way that showed that sort of cruelty to people, which is wrong. As many mistakes in as many areas as I've made, who was I to sit up and even inadvertently have people feel written off? As often as I've been hurt by feeling written off in my life.
Do you think everybody sees it like that, though, where that perception doesn't match that intention? Do you think when it's posed to them, it's brought to them, do you think everybody's has that willingness to see it that way? Or do you think some people just don't care?
Or even get off on it?
Yeah.
I think you're asking that question for a reason.
I've got someone that this really happened to me. I was training someone that was at the top of our food chain. I was training this individual, and the other people that were on the same level as me, they saw that, I guess, as somewhat of a threat, and they totally perceive me a certain way. But if you were to tell them, if you were to ask them, like, how is Trip? How is Bodie? Totally off. But their perception of me was they had their mind made up. This is how I am. But my intentions were not matching their perception. And what happened was I look at it like the validation level. You can interpret something one way, but if you don't reach that validation level, you're going to be wrong more times than not. And this individual called me into their office and had my supervisor in there as well. And they closed the door, and they proceeded to give me a butt chewing that Susan Bodenheimer has never given me once in my life. I mean, I've never received a butt chewing this hard. And even when I tried to speak, it was, nope, you don't speak. Let me tell you about you, is basically what they did. They proceeded to tell me how I was, and it was all their perception of me. And it kind of...
How did you react?
Well, I was shocked, for one, because I'm like, I cannot believe I'm letting another grown man sit here and curse me out right in front of me. And I'm being told not to say something. Yeah. And, but I was like, they're off the mark. They're so wrong. That is not my intentions. Because there was a little scenario that happened. I picked something up. It was a controlled item. I was like, if this gets found out that they left this laying behind, they're going to be in trouble. They'll probably lose their job. So I gave it to them. but I gave it to them and just like, hey man, I grabbed this because you wanted me to grab it for you, wink, wink. But they took it as I was diming them out. And they were like, I knew you're a snake in the grass. You're a brown noser. You're this, that, and the other. And afterwards, I brought it to the scary thing about them, and there are personality types that are like this. They don't see anything wrong with that. To them, it's just work. It's just how it was. They came up to me a couple of minutes later, and he was like, hey man, what do you and the family got planned this weekend? And I was like, we're not going to sit here and act like we're friends all of a sudden. And when I told them, he was like, he was taken back. He's like, whoa, time out. What? And he literally took his uniform off, put on his sweats, came in my office and was like, what a crazy day, man. What you and the family got planned?
Wow. I'm with Melody there. Like, wow.
Startled. And so I said, oh, time out. Don't come in here and try to small talk me and talk to me about my family, because 20 minutes ago you were cursing me out. And they were like, whoa, that got to you? That just shows there's something wrong with you. That maybe there was a kernel of truth to what I was saying that's impacting you the way that it is. And that's when I realized not everybody's perception is going to match up with my intentions. And it really created a huge rift with me and that individual the rest of the time that we worked together.
I would create a huge rift with me and that person probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's the Voldemort name that we just don't mention when I talk to people. Right. But yeah, that was a true story.
Wow. Yep. Do you think that kindness is ever a indicator of weakness?
Absolutely. I think that quote, kindness can be mistaken as weakness, or I think it is. And I think some people know that. I think they know that there's certain individuals out there that they can, because you're going to have those power hungry people, or the people that, are greedy or whatever you want to call it. But I do think that they can, use that to their advantage. Absolutely. And I hate to say it because you want everybody to be kind. You want everybody
and you want to advocate for kindness, but I do think that there are times in life where you can't be. It doesn't mean you have to go out of your way to be cruel, but you may have to go out of your comfort zone in terms of dealing with that person.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit sitting here taking in that story about hearing about yourself. I mean, that would just be so devastating. It reminds me of a story of a certain general who worked in the White House who received apparently a dressing down by a sitting president. And this person said, this is a renowned general who had fought in wars. He said he'd never received in his entire life any sort of verbal abuse like what he had received from this president. And apparently he even thought about just walking out the door, and he didn't. But it goes as to the impact of that sort of behavior, and talking at someone like that, especially if it's negative, it's dehumanizing them. And yes, at the end of the day, to me, that's the ultimate basis of what makes something cruel, stripping away the humanity or the basic dignity of the person involved, or their rights in one way or another, as opposed to kindness, which is a little bit harder to define. In fact, I'm curious, Bodhi, if you had to define kindness, what is it?
I would like to say that it's genuine. It's just genuine. Kindness, being genuine to people. I think it's being considerate of other people. I think oftentimes, and that, and I say it out loud, it's probably considerate piece. Just being considerate of other people's feelings, how other people are coming off. That's something that I've gotten so much better at. You mentioned emotional intelligence earlier. I've tried not to get emotionally hijacked when I'm talking to people. I try to take their feelings into consideration. I try to understand that it's not just always how I see things.
Yeah.
I'm not the easiest person to be around, whether it's work, whether it's living under the same roof with someone, or just hanging out. But I think it's generous, considerate, being friendly towards other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the big things to me that pop into my mind when I think of kindness. What about you?
I'm going to argue that a little bit more philosophically, but please dispute me. And Richard, Melody, Jessica, Gabe, anyone else who might be in the audience, I will argue that kindness is an act that supports social cohesion. Cruelty is that which undermines it.
You want me to argue with you? But I mean, I agree with you on that. I do. Yeah, kindness, social cohesion. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Alan, to be honest with you. I think that kindness is putting others ahead of yourself. I think kindness is mentoring people, kind of pointing people in the right direction, coaching people, getting people to think in a different way that benefits them, not you. And I think kindness is getting the most out of everybody that benefits everyone involved, not just yourself. I think cruelty is more self-centered, more ulterior motives on your end. But yeah, I definitely am under the same mindset as you in terms of kindness versus cruelty. I think that's a really good way of defining those two.
Trip, have you seen that miniseries Chernobyl?
I have. Yeah.
I knew you would have.
Yep.
I would have been so hurt if you'd said no. So one of the things I find fascinating about that is that apparently it was set up for those who have not seen it. It is a fictionalization. Yeah, it's
so well done.
Yeah, it's yeah. So it's a 5-part miniseries just describing the nuclear accident, the meltdown that occurred in the nuclear power plants in Chernobyl, Russia during I think the 80s is when that was.
Yeah, I think it was like mid 80s, 86, 80, somewhere around there. I'm totally wrong, but
yeah, I could be wrong too. I believe that should have been right. It was right before the collapse of the Soviet Union, so that would have been the mid 80s. And one of the things that I find fascinating about it is that each episode I read structurally was an imitation or done in a genre of a particular film. So the first episode apparently was done as a horror movie. Then the second one was done as a spy thriller. The third one was done, one of them was done as a disaster film. Another one was done as a war film. And then one of them was a courtroom drama. And I may be missing one. And the one that was a war film, when you think about it, it actually had every trope. It involved a young man who is naive, who goes into a war camp or a basic training. He endures the basic training. There's the father figure who is the drill sergeant or the squad leader or whatever, who adopts him, and he goes into a mission in which he has to endure the true horrors of war, in which it's all exposed to him, and the glamour is stripped away. And in this case, the tropes usually go one of two ways. Either someone emerges a hero, or they're so psychologically damaged that their survival is itself the act of triumph. And that, of course, involved that part of the miniseries was the one involving the dogs.
Yeah.
And I will ask you this. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this. What happens is that the Soviet Union soldiers, including this young draftee that was the focus of this particular mini film, are assigned to go and kill every dog and other mammal in the zone. And they do. And if the head of the squad basically tells them, look, kill them, make it easy. If I find out you're torturing them, I'll shoot you, basically, or something like that. And
they killed them because of their exposure they had
to the radiation.
To the radiation.
Right. And they were afraid that they would leave. I think that they were afraid that they would leave the area and then spread whatever.
Yep.
And so, and then of course, like the big horror moment is when he becomes a man, I think, or at least the critical test is when he has to kill a dog that's nursing her puppies, and he can't do it, and the father figure comes in and does it for him, and there's mercy, and then you see the final scene that I won't describe. It's just too devastating to even think about. Apparently, by the way, that was based on an actual account that someone wrote of their experience being a soldier there during that time period. And so, do you think that killing those animals, I raise all of this not just to horrify people, but to ask, do you think killing those animals was an act of cruelty?
Yes.
And by the way, sending, by the way, people into that zone to kill those animals, was that an act of cruelty too?
Yeah. So first of all, even though Scott described that scene, and for all our dog lovers who are like, absolutely not, still go watch it. Still go watch.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous or anything like that. It's very tragic, actually.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was cruelty. But I mean, it's just like when you have, to me, like to bring it more to like a everyday example that people go through. What if you have a dog that's suffering? You have a dog that's ill. I had to put a dog down. And
how old were you when you did that?
I was like in my 30s, but the dog was 17 years old. Hardest thing I ever did in my life. And I felt so bad for doing it, but she was in so much pain. And I have battled with that. I mean, I actually got her paw print tattooed on my forearm. She was like a child to me. But yeah, doing that, I struggled internally, because for me, it wasn't like, there's a lot of danger with the scenario, like the Netflix series, I believe it's on, for those
HBO
or HBO or Showtime or one of those. But yeah, but if those dogs get exposed, then I mean, there's no telling what could have happened, what could have come from that if they did have the radiation with them. But I know, like for me, I struggled internally when I put my dog down. I was like, that was cruel on my part to make that decision and to do that. And that's something still to this day. I mean, and that was 8 years ago that I had to do it. I still struggle with it. But people have also told me that no, that was the right thing to do. That was the kind thing to do, because the dog was suffering so much, and she actually had a cancer around her orbital bone, and it was eating away at around her eye. And but that's really deep, because that's something that kind of strikes home to me, and I feel that that's a very good self-reflection question. Is it cruel or is it kind? And yeah.
Is it cruel to kill roaches?
And see, and that's the thing, like, where's the line? Where's the line with that? Because I will kill a mosquito in a heartbeat, and to me, it's kind for me to do that. That is not cruel at all. But yeah, roaches, ants, mosquitoes, they're life forms. So I mean, where is that line? If you think one's acceptable, and I think,
well, it also goes to other questions like remedies to diseases. Is it cruel to take antibiotics that are killing bacteria that are life forms and presumably aren't given a choice about whether they want to live or not?
Yeah, and I mean, and even if, I mean, look at products that are being sold out there or that are being tested. What do they tend to use? Mice or some sort of animal. I mean, and there's all sorts of, organizations out there that try to shut down animal cruelty and things of that nature. But yeah, I'm an animal lover. So for me, anything that harms any kind of animal, insects are different, but animals, yeah, maybe that's the line. Insects and animals, but yeah, that's really good. What do you think on that? I'm actually interested to see your.
I've got to ask you one thing though. As an animal lover, how did you react when you watched that particular episode of Chernobyl?
Oh,
did you see it coming?
You know what? You could probably bring up about 50 different scenes from that show, and I would probably have to really think about it and be like, I'm trying to remember that. I may have to Google it. You brought up the fact that the dogs were exposed, and I was like, I already know where he's going with this. It was hard for me. It was hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. I can watch like Pet Cemetery. I love horror films. I got all this slasher stuff behind me. I don't have a Pet Cemetery poster up for a reason. But yeah, anything like that, it's hard for me to watch. I'm weak with that. I can see a human get hurt all day long, but I see a dog limping, and I'm a softie.
Yeah,
So,
I was watching Jaws the other day, and there was the scene where there's the beach, and it's right before the boy in the raft gets killed.
the dog.
The dog
Yep.
is just gone. It's
That's
horrible.
yeah. And if someone is cruel to a dog, then I want to be cruel to that person. I will. We were talking about Cyprus before we came on here because Oleg is like lost in Europe somewhere right now. And for those of you out there, I asked Oleg where he is. He's like, I have no clue. He had to look on his phone to figure out where he is, but he's doing good. But Cyprus, when I was deployed down there, the Cypriots, the way they treated the dogs, like right around the base and stuff, very dismissive of them. To them, they were like mice or rats or something. They could care less about them. They loved cats. They loved cats because they protected the island from snakes and all sorts of other creatures. But yeah, I would see that, and it would tear me up. I'm like, I cannot be nice to this person. I can't show kindness to this person for, kicking at that dog or throwing something at that dog to get away. I found myself being guilty of being cruel to them because of how they were treating the dogs.
Bodhi, where can people find out more about you, and what are you doing that is an act of kindness in the world week after week after week?
Well, one act of kindness is on The Shadows Podcast at theshadowspodcast.com. You can go check us out. In fact, we had a giveaway this past week. We had a little Instagram giveaway.
I love it.
Yep. And one of our listeners, Jessica, actually was the winner of our giveaway.
I love it. I love it.
Got connected through the show. But yeah, theshadowspodcast.com. People come on there. They share their stories each and every week. We chronicle their stories. We have a vast variety of guests. We have military members. We have athletes, CEOs, authors. We have Dee Wallace coming up on our Halloween special.
I can't wait. That is very, very exciting.
So very excited about that. We also have, which you are our next guest for Rise from the Shadows, which is our little TED Talk, like 30-minute episodes. So you can listen to them going to work, working out, just hanging out around the house. Very inspirational. We try to inspire people through others' experiences that they've been through. So definitely check us out on Instagram at _Shadows Podcast. But if you go to our website, we've got everything on there. We can send you to whatever social media platform you want. You can listen to our episodes on there as well.
I love it.
Scott, you got something going on, a little change of scenery the past couple of months with your show, right?
Yeah, actually. So as many of you know, but not everybody, I am the host of Scott Mason's Purpose Highway at purposehighway.com. And the change of scenery is a change of focus that we had beginning earlier in the summer. We are discussing large social changes concerning how people connect with each other through the search for meaningful lives, particularly with regard to their spirituality, their ethical grounding, and their sense of purpose. This is a silent revolution of thought because it is as profound as any change in thinking that has occurred in human recorded and pre-recorded history, yet no one is really talking about it. In addition, it is about those who are seeking to inoculate themselves and others against the secret plague of alienation that has accompanied the silent revolution's changes that have led to the collapse of a lot of the historical institutions like religions, but also civic associations that have grounded people in their search for meaning. So we are having guests, including academics that study this as a cultural matter, those that are creating new pathways for creating connections with others vis-a-vis ethics, purpose, or spirituality, and ordinary people whose lives have transitioned as they have come to find unique pathways outside of the historical institutions that have guided us to connection to their inner humanity, their spirituality, as well as ethics. And I welcome anyone who wants to take a listen to join us, as I mentioned earlier, at purposehighway.com. I do have one last request. If you've enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review on Facebook and LinkedIn. We'd love to hear about it. And we'd love to know, in particular, what engages you the most, because that enables us to be able to focus on it. Hopefully, you'll be all about Trip, because we love having him and we cannot wait to have him back. I will also say it is an act of kindness when we choose to patronize businesses that are trying to do good things in the world. Spectrum Design Foundation is our show's sponsor. They are a t-shirt printing company, and they also do embroidery on things like baseball hats. They also print on hoodies and tote bags and gym bags and all sorts of other textile related items. And one of the things that makes them so special is that they hire, by and large, folks who are on the autistic spectrum, who have a 90% unemployment rate. Their CEO, Patrick Bardsley, has been a guest on this show, is passionate about his message. The company is growing dramatically, and they are well worth learning more about. In fact, as we close out for the night, I'm going to share a little information about them. And Bodhi, I want to say thank you for being kind enough to let me just say it all over. Thank you for being kind enough to be here with us tonight and share so much.
Thank you.
T-shirt. Yeah, let's show them.